We'll briefly talk about the current market situation, but today I'll also show you which altcoins I'm currently accumulating or keeping an eye on, and where I'm waiting for lower entry points in order to potentially make big profits with these altcoins. Because before we talk about the altcoins I find interesting, we first need to take a look at the state of the market. To put it simply, the state of the market actually looks extremely optimistic. Prices have risen very high, but we still have a bit of time left, about 3 or 4 months ahead of us, where things should actually go really well. And this is exactly where you need to pay attention. When we broke the 100K mark with Bitcoin for the first time, we were ranked 13th on the Coinbase app. So retail investors were definitely already involved here. There was a bit of euphoria going on here. We then really had a tough sideways phase, corrections and so on, lasting for weeks, even months. Of course, that flushed out quite a few retail investors again. Now, we are indeed rising again, but just look at this remarkable achievement. We've successfully set impressive new all-time highs here and are currently ranked a very respectable 157 on the popular Coinbase app. That means we still don't have much retail involved here at all. But that's also kind of the reason why the altcoins aren't performing crazily at the moment, because retail is especially important for altcoins, whereas with Bitcoin we currently have large ETF inflows, MicroStrategy and so on. We don't have that with the altcoins. Nevertheless, I still believe that the rotation will come, but it will probably only get really interesting in combination with retail. And just based on this fact from this chart here, I believe that in this cycle we will really see at least 160K, probably even significantly higher. Because if we were just to follow the M2 money supply, we would already reach 150, 160K just from that alone. If the euphoria phase comes on top of that, then it's going to be really awesome because, I mean, just look at it. We're standing this high and there really isn't a single retail investor involved yet. That's going to get really interesting, and I also believe that this time we'll get more retail investors into the market through TikTok, Instagram, and so on. And just because of this realization, I believe that we definitely haven't seen the top yet, that it's still to come. And here, there are 3 pillars that are really relevant: dominance, social media, and the indicators. Because here too you can clearly see the crazier it gets, the more euphoric we become, the stronger everything rises, the more clicks these YouTubers naturally get. These are things you should pay attention to, but luckily there are already dedicated charts for this, and you can clearly see that we really don't have any retail involvement here. Even on YouTube and so on, there isn't much interest in crypto, and that's important. In terms of price, we're in a really good position, but there's hardly any retail here. That suggests that we are still far from being in an overheated zone. To quickly summarize again how you should realize profits here, once Bitcoin dominance is around 50%, you should start selling most of your altcoins. Between 50 and 42% Bitcoin dominance is probably the peak period. From that point on, you should definitely exit most altcoins. And just as we enter using DCA, we also sell in the same way. Don't just have a single target in mind, like the coin absolutely has to do a 500x and then I'll sell, because with targets like that, you can easily miss the mark. That's why you should always scale out bit by bit. And especially in this regard, you just have to know that the market rotates. Bit by bit, from one narrative to the next, from one narrative to the next. The market just doesn't move the way you sometimes imagine, but it rotates from narrative to narrative. And here you really have to actively observe the market so that you can actually benefit from it. We usually handle it by rotating nicely as well, because especially at the beginning, the big caps perform quite well. Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP and the like, you can see for yourself, they're performing very, very well these days. At some point you would take profits here, cash out part of the money into fiat, but also leave another part in USDT and then invest that into mid caps. From the mid caps, you would eventually do the same thing again with low caps and so on. That way, you can rotate nicely and try to get as much as possible out of these narratives. Because especially nowadays, the market has simply evolved, and it's not like just one narrative pumps for months on end. No, of course they take turns. With Bitcoin, we filled the CME gap on Friday. I already marked the CME gap for you a few days ago. When we were up here, I said there was a chance that we'd either move up, pick up the 121,000, or really go back down to fill the CME gap. And the interesting thing is, we lost this support here, tested it again, and then bam, it dropped. So in my opinion, if we lost this support, we'd head into the CME gap. That's what we've done now. Very interesting, because this of course gives us new buying opportunities. On the total 3 chart, which we also look at when it comes to altcoins, I'll show you 5 altcoin buys where we're currently accumulating and where we're interested for the long term. But before we dive into the altcoins, I also take a close look at the total 3 chart, because this chart really speaks for the altcoins. And here we simply have a high time frame zone, a zone that is very significant on a larger scale. And we are right in this zone, and I think we're starting to see a turnaround here, which of course gives a boost to the altcoins. That's why I think, based on this chart, that you can definitely invest in altcoins in the short term. We can also see very clearly in the altcoin dominance that we've just had a correction. The correction hit exactly the 38.2 Fibonacci level, and from here we tend to move upwards for now. And here the 0.5 Fibonacci level becomes interesting. If we break above that level and retest it, then we'll see the breakout. That would definitely be another confirmation, especially with regard to altcoins. That's why I look at all these charts. Of course, Bitcoin is also significant for altcoins. The total 3 chart refers entirely to altcoins, and of course so does the altcoin dominance. What I also like to do is look at the altcoin chart in combination with the 25 EMA, and I do this on a daily basis. And here we can clearly see we've also fallen below it here, which definitely points to short-term pain for altcoins. It is definitely important that we fight our way back above it. After that, we would definitely see more from the altcoins, but we absolutely have to reclaim this zone first. The 25 EMA is quite important for this. We can also see that right now we've found a bit of resistance here at the 50 EMA. Let's just hope that this zone holds and that we can reclaim the 25 EMA. The first candidate today is Injective. A very interesting project, especially in this cycle. I don't even need to say much about it. Highly scalable, cross-chain, interoperable, and so on. But what I also really like here, these days they have more transactions than Solana. That's crazy. They really have an extremely high number of transactions. In the last 7 days, we've had 146 million transactions here. That's actually more than what we've seen on Solana. And that's crazy. That's the kind of on-chain activity I really like here. And we're also in a high time frame zone here, where we could just see a bounce upwards. I mean, just look at it. Here we had a low, here we had a lower high, and that's what we're expecting here as well at the lower high, that we'll see another breakout here, that this is currently a good zone between $12 and $14 where you can buy Injective. Then we have the project Cyber. With this project, we have to say clearly, if this zone holds, we're very optimistic here and believe in a strong bounce upwards. However, if we break below this level again, we would definitely close the position as a precaution and exit the trade here. So that's the thing, either this zone holds and we see a strong bounce, or we fall below it, and accordingly we would sell, because otherwise this also looks like a lower high, as if we're just gradually moving up step by step. That's why it has to hold. This could also be a double top here. But if this zone doesn't hold, it looks like a double top, and then from here we would definitely fall even lower. That's basically what we're looking at with Cyber from a technical analysis perspective. And then we have PancakeSwap here. This is a decentralized exchange, and you have to keep in mind that decentralized exchanges become really interesting, especially during a bull run, because that's when people don't want to cash out through banks anymore. They start looking for alternatives, and that's when something like this comes into play. In terms of TVL, we haven't held up all that well over the past few months. But I'm pretty confident that in a bull run, this could look very different again, and very quickly. Here we also have a high time frame zone. You can see for yourselves how often we've entered this zone. It's really important here that we don't lose support in this zone. And if that doesn't happen, we're expecting a relief rally here, which could definitely be quite substantial. And overall, we already have a nice uptrend here. Take a look at it, a really nice uptrend. We just mustn't lose our footing here. Especially up here, we've often found support. If we manage to break above this level properly, I definitely expect a nice uptrend here. And as I said, decentralized products become especially interesting in a bull run. Then today we also have Jupiter. That's the decentralized exchange on Solana, and it's by far the largest one Solana has. So also in terms of TVL and so on, it's therefore the most interesting project on Solana. Here it simply looks like we've seen a double bottom, and it gets interesting here as soon as we sustainably break through this zone. If that happens, we would have confirmed this double bottom here, and that definitely points to a strong upward trend. We're also expecting a big future here, especially in the bull run, especially if Solana becomes more in demand again. Because right now you just have to say no one is really interested in Solana. If that changes, it will change just as quickly for Jupiter. Here we also first need to break out of this larger overarching trend channel so that we can see some big new moves. And then we have Bitance or Tau, in my opinion still the best AI project we have. But here too, we can see that we simply have a trend channel that has remained intact the whole time. We need to break through this trend channel in a sustainable way. That would be really nice. In the short term, it actually looks like this is a good entry point between $320 and $360. In that range, we buy bit and saw, but we expect a reversal and anticipate a larger upward trend. However, the stop loss would be triggered if we fall below $280. If we fall below that level, we would just be making new lows, and then this upward trend would no longer be intact. That's why it's really important, and as you know, I have my price targets here in the bigger picture as well. Of course, what's important is that we first break out of this trend channel, but if we do that, we expect at least $2,500 in this cycle from a broader perspective. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I also hope you liked that I introduced you to a few coins that I currently find interesting. If you enjoyed all of this, as always, leave a like and a comment. And with that, I'd say see you next time, friends. Ciao.